Computer. Hi, my name's Wendy from Sunflower Publishing. I'm really delighted this afternoon to have a wonderful guest who has just released a superb book called Broken Madonna. She's going to tell us all about it. She's going to tell us her backstory, how she got started, and the road to success. So before I start diving in and asking her loads of questions, I just want to give you a quick resume. Anna was born in England to older immigrant parents. She spent long, hot summer days in the Apennine mountain village. Oh, I feel like I'm welling up already. But they had left behind to escape poverty and lack of opportunity. In the local dialect, she listened to stories of elderly relatives about a time, a place, and a way of life that was far, far removed from 70s and 80s suburbia. Those voices, particularly of strong women who led tough lives, never went away. Neither did the echoes of Catholicism. That's gorgeous. Anna has been awarded support for her writing from the Arts Council England. She writes short stories, flash fiction, hard to say, and poetry. She is a Chair of Trustees of Literature Development Agency New Writing South, which is very impressive, very beautiful. So,
Thank you.
welcome, benvenuti.
Thank you.
It's been
Grazie.
we started communicate. I was going back over the email streams, and I think it started about 2 years ago with a hello, you don't know me, but I'm writing these books and things really. So, where should we start? Okay, the first thing I want to start with is the cover of the book. I
Mhm.
see a lot of covers, as I'm sure you do. You go into Waterstones, you're surrounded by covers, but this was quite superb. Okay, so how did you get that cover? That's obviously really significant. How did you get to that? Was that a joint effort with your designer? Tell us about that.
So I was very lucky to be put in touch with a cover designer called Patrick Knowles, who happens by chance to live locally in the Brighton and Hove area where I live. But he's designed a lot of very well known books, and so we got together. I talked about what the book was, and he came up with this idea of the girl in the headscarf, and we really, she essentially represents the character Elisabetta, and we really thought about the thing about the pale blue eyes is really important through the course of the book, which without revealing any spoilers, but sort of to make sure that that came across really well in the cover. And then obviously to capture a little bit of Italy in the cover as well with the
It
landscape
does.
shot
Yeah,
as
it
well.
really
And
does.
then
Yeah,
the
it's
sort of the
beautiful.
whole sort of that kind of jagged line thing
Yeah,
to kind of represent the
the
brokenness
broken.
and yeah, without it being sort of too, what's the word? I mean, without it being too disturbing, if you know what I mean. So, no, I really absolutely chuffed with the cover. He
It
gave me
is.
lots of options, but I knew that that was the
That
one
was what you
straight away.
wanted. I think it's a very haunting photograph when someone just turns round to the side. It's like a bit Mona Lisa-ish in a way, isn't it? She obviously just turned to the side, snap. Well, no, he didn't take a photograph of her, he painted her. But it's that look, and yeah, I think you pick up that book and then you're gonna look at the blurb on the back and hopefully buy it. So shall we start with the book first and then we'll go back in time? Love the book, really, really love the book. And I mean,
And that really means a lot to me.
well, yeah, you never know what to expect. Really, I never, especially when I'm on the book blog tours, really, I just know when I agree to it that it's been set in Italy. But this was I think I said in my review, so many themes and layers and things coming through, all sorts of things. So go back to that moment when you thought, what shall I write about? Broken Madonna. Tell me.
So I had the idea of two girls in an orphanage and one of them claiming to see the Madonna quite, probably in about 2018 for the first time. So I had these two characters and I thought a lot about what would the relationship would be between two girls. So it came around that I created Elisabetta, who's 11 years old. So there's a lot of stories, as you're well aware, in the Catholic Church of girls around puberty claiming to see the Madonna. And obviously the most famous one that people know about is Bernadette of Lourdes, and still very much a site of pilgrimage to this very day. So I thought about, well, what if you had that young girl and she has a friend, but her friend doesn't believe her, and they're each other's only friend for various reasons that become clear in the book. So Elizabeth is very fragile. She's 11 years old. Adelina is older. She's 15. She's still at the orphanage and she doesn't quite know why she's still there. But essentially, she's been held back because she's what's deemed as slow. What
Mhm.
we would now say she's dyslexic. So
Yes, yeah,
she's
of
unable to
course.
read and write easily. And so she's been kept there with a sort of a bit of a, come and help us look after the babies in the orphanage as well. So she's kind of a natural carer, but there's something, she's deeply loyal to Elisabetta. They have a very deep friendship, but there's also all the other aspects of friendship that are in there as well, which is kind of jealousy. There's the protectiveness, there's the love, there's the kind of, not when Adelina starts to not believe her, she's kind of going against all the things that she cares about in her friend, and obviously that leads her down a certain path. So you've got a conflict that comes there. So I first had the idea to answer your original question, as I say, a few years ago, and then I just kind of let them sort of develop a little bit in terms of who the characters were. I did a sort of an arc for the story in terms of where I hoped it would end up. And then, you have that wonderful moment where your characters just take flight themselves.
I'm sure. I'm sure.
And then the whole set of scenarios start to kind of evolve that really it's when the magic happens when you're
Yeah.
writing. It's when that moment where you think, okay, so I've created these people. They've got minds of their own and they want to do something else. So, although I had a direction of travel, the bit that I really enjoy about writing is when you really get into those characters and they start to take you somewhere different and interesting and exciting and way beyond anything you can come up with on your own. So I think there is something almost, obviously I know the context of this book is religious, but it's not an overly religious book.
No,
But
no,
there
no.
is there is a kind of, I think there is a something quite incredible, something magical that happens when you feel as if you're channeling something else, and that's all I can say. I can't describe it any better than that. That sometimes there were moments where I felt that Adelina's voice was so strong, it was almost like I was being dictated notes or something, just kind of carry on, tell my story.
Which character do you feel of the two girls, do you feel you have the most empathy with?
Without a doubt, Adelina. So she's the sort of socially awkward
Yeah,
15-year-old.
yeah.
So she's someone who's been overlooked in her entire life. And she's just kind of almost forgotten in the orphanage. The young nun, Sister Beatrice, who's in charge, pays her no attention until she becomes quite useful around Elisabetta's so-called miracles.
Mhm.
So I liked Adelina because I felt as if I was bringing somebody to life who wouldn't normally get a voice.
No, no.
Um, and as well, I don't know if I've mentioned this to you, but she's slightly based. There's a tiny bit of her that's
Sophia.
Sophia Loren. So Sophia Loren, when she was growing up,
Mm.
if you read her history, she also felt that she had quite a difficult time, and although she's seen as that a great beauty and a fantastic actress, which she is, there's no doubt about it, she had that moment in life which many girls go through in puberty
Where
where
she
she was
felt.
are
Yeah.
awkward. And as well, she was nicknamed La Giraffa.
Yeah. Oh, right. Right.
And so I did steal that little bit for Adelina. So very long legs and a long neck and a big smile, which was seen as, rather than being that kind of cutely pretty sort of girl, but quite striking. And Adelina being uncomfortable in her body, her breasts have developed. She's gone through puberty. She doesn't know what to do with her new sort of her new body, so to speak. And Julio, as we come, starts to find her attractive, but she has no idea of her own beauty or her own
No,
brilliance
no.
or her own potential.
I think because you get that timeline, I mean, we're with the girls from the age of 11, which Elizabetta is. And then as it moves forward, I mean, at the beginning, you've no idea that you're going on a journey with the two girls. I mean, it could have just stayed, with visions and that was it. But it moves forward, really, didn't it?
Yes, it does.
So that, I think at the beginning you have no idea what she's going to be like with a boy, whether or not any boys are going to fancy her, if she's going to get married. So it's just a page turner, isn't it? Because you don't know how it's going to work out for her. You don't know if she's going to meet anyone, not meet anyone. Is it someone she's already known? And we don't want to give anything away there at all, but you don't know how it's going to pan out for her,
Mm.
really.
Yeah, no, I wanted a sense of a character that, as I say, somewhat overlooked, but I wanted to, the
You want
reader
to
to
root for her,
root
don't
for her,
you?
really want her
Yeah,
to kind of come
absolutely.
through in life
Absolutely.
because, life has, dealt her a pretty poor hand to start off with. So, she's
Yeah,
orphaned
I'm
at the
sure.
age of 7. Her father has died in the Second
Yeah,
World War
yeah.
in the battlefield. Her mother has died and she's left alone. So she's, at the age of 7, she goes into an orphanage, and the only relationship she really has is the one with Elisabetta. And sadly, I think these sorts of tales, they have happened in life.
Mm.
And I wanted, to go right through to the very end of her life and sort of
Well,
see
I
things
think
work out for her.
the reader gets a kind of a resolution because the reader can then sit back in the end and think, oh, well, that's nice, whether happy marriage or not.
Yeah,
You get that resolution that, well, she deserves something,
yeah.
really. And it's nice to see that happen. What I wasn't so sure of was how you felt about the Catholic priests and the Catholic Church. And sometimes, you kind of look for the signs. And I kept highlighting all these bits where you mention a Catholic priest, and never once, oh, what a nice guy he was. Never once did that come out. And I was kind of feeling that, is that based on your own experience with Catholicism, with religion?
So I ought to kind of explain a little bit my
Yeah,
own relationship with Catholicism. So I was obviously brought up as a Catholic. I
yeah,
went to a Catholic primary school and a secondary school here in England. Attended mass regularly, and then I had a period of years where I wasn't involved in the church at all, like many people. And then as I had my own children, started to think about, well, how would I like to, what part would I like faith to have in their life? So I returned to the church, brought we brought up both our children as Catholics. And then I actually got quite deeply involved. I worked at a parish level. And then I worked at headed up a retreat centre here in a Catholic retreat centre in the UK as well. So I've got quite a deep knowledge of how the Catholic Church
it
works. And I
works.
think from what people have said to me who either aren't religious or are religious about the book is it's quite light touch in terms of
Yeah,
the
yeah,
religion. So
sure.
I don't want to kind of, I don't want to bombard people
No,
with
no.
it, but at the same time, it is very relevant, obviously, for
It
the
is
actual
relevant.
story.
And as I said in my review, it's relevant all around me. I live in Abruzzo, and it's relevant on a daily basis from the shrines that I see. I mean, some English friends are doing a carol service in a couple of weeks, and one of the evenings that they're going to do is around a shrine,
Mm.
which is on the way down into the town. It's so relevant. It's there all the time, and I'm not religious, but I can see how it affects people today. So I can imagine how it would have affected people a generation ago
Yes,
as well. I don't think you can talk about Italy without mentioning faith.
mm, yes,
Really, it's there all the time, isn't it?
it is, and I hope that I've been fairly even-handed. So obviously, you mentioned about the priests, and obviously Padre Bosco is the sort of scheming, wily priest in the story who has
It's
his
got to
own.
be a baddie, though, hasn't
So, but
it?
we have got the other side. We've got Sister Beatrice, who is the young
Yeah,
nun
yeah,
who's in charge of the orphanage, and she wants to see essentially a renaissance of women in the church, and she's a bit fed
yeah.
up of being treated
Yeah,
like
it's like that.
second class.
In some way, I felt it was a little bit, I mean, the lovely book Chocolat by Joanne Harris. Essentially, it's about chocolate and Johnny Depp and wonderful things, but that element of faith is there underneath. And you've got this father who's, well, just horrid, horrid. He's the dictator in the town. He says, he's doing the sermons and preaching to everybody and controlling everybody, and that's part of it. And I felt that was a bit there in your book. He's there as a bit of a villain in a way.
Oh yeah, Padre Bosco.
Yeah,
He's got sort of he likes things to run a certain way
yeah,
in his
yeah,
manner.
exactly.
But the one thing I'd say in his defense and the soft bit that he does help Adelina, and
Yes,
although
yes.
she's helping him, he does do her a very good turn, which sets her off in a different path in life and gives her more opportunity. So I think I don't want to sort of diss all priests or anything or make any great commentary about the church apart from to say that character of Padre Bosco, who is someone who's very kind of like, this is my fiefdom and how things work around here. And you can imagine that very much that small, excuse me, small town Italy, where the priest is central to life. I think I think he's pretty realistic portrayal. And the other thing that you touched on, Wendy, that I just wanted to comment on was obviously after the Second World War, Italy was in a quite a desperate place. So the kind of turning to look for a miracle or for some hope wasn't that it's not that it's not stretching the imagination a great deal. I, like you when you were saying about going to certain shrines. I can remember when I used to go to Italy as a child, being taken to one particular shrine very regularly. The Madonna being processed through the streets on the 15th of August. All of that sort of thing. It's embedded in the Italian
Oh, absolutely,
culture and the psyche.
absolutely.
So, and I think it was a kind of, I wanted to tell the sort of a more personal bit of who would be behind all of this, what would be going on.
I mean, people have got to read this. I mean, yes, okay, it does mean more to me because I live here. But I know, I mean, I was married to an Italian for many years. And I think one of his aunts who died when she was about 18, she had visions. And
Yeah,
she's,
yeah,
it's real, it's real. And
yeah.
because she had visions, whatever they were, and she died when she was about 18. So they got a statue and they put it in a box and near the house, and people went there with flowers.
Yeah.
It's the normal thing to do, isn't it, really?
Yes, and I mean, even so, a couple of things that come to mind on that. There's been a story very recently about a statue crying bloods of um, tears of blood in Rome that people
Yeah,
have been going to
yeah,
very regularly. And the other thing that came to mind was when I was researching this, I came across somebody called Angela Volpini, and
yeah,
she came to see the Madonna
yeah,
in exactly the same
yeah.
period in northern Italy, but also in
Right.
the Apennine Mountains. But and she founded she was very much, there's lovely old newsreel of her sort of as a child and the crowds and everything.
Mm.
And to this day, she's still alive, and she has a foundation, and she has a very good following. So, it's as I say, none of this, although it might seem a little bit sort of, well, why do people believe that? Actually, it's still very much part of people's lives.
Absolutely,
So.
absolutely. So the book came out in November. How are you finding your reviews?
I'm really absolutely delighted. It's
This must be quite a new experience. I mean, let's just say to everybody that this is. I know you have written another book and it's still there on your laptop, but this is the debut novel, we can say, really,
yeah,
isn't it? So for you, this is like delivering a baby. This is 9 months, probably longer,
yeah,
of
a few
this
years.
9 months of of this thing growing and developing, and then finally you give birth to it and it's launched. So tell us how wonderful that is.
Oh, well, it's just absolutely fantastic. I mean, I've had some truly wonderful reviews, and I think the thing is, when you write, obviously you hope people will read it and enjoy it, but when you actually start getting their feedback that they think it's a really good book, then that warms your heart, and that's what it's all about, really. I set out thinking, well, if this touches people and starts to make them think a little bit differently about, belief, faith, redemption. But as I say, there are only a few of the themes. There's a lot about stolen motherhood in there, and
Absolutely. Yeah,
what
that's
women were
yeah,
forced
I
into.
thought that. Yeah. That's
Um,
and that's a topic for another day, I think, really. But yeah, absolutely. Um, Now, how do you feel now? You've launched this book, the reviews are coming in, they're very favorable. Is it, I'm a published author now, or do you feel, is there a sense of imposter syndrome going on? Or, well, I've worked for it, I deserve it now. How's that affected you?
Well, it's funny because in a way, I sort of feel that I've written the work that I did was to write the book,
Yeah.
and then to kind of put it out in the world. What reception it gets, kind of in a way, isn't down to me anymore.
No,
And of course,
no.
there's all sorts of things you can do, connecting and social media and all the rest of it. But in terms of how the book reaches people and how it moves them, that's kind of there's nothing more I can do about that. It's almost like I've given birth to this baby, and it's
Yeah,
almost like,
yeah,
and the child will
yeah.
grow the way that the child will grow, and of course you can have an influence, but in a way it hasn't. It now, what I realise, and to answer your question, I now feel it's got a life of its own,
Right.
and that's something that I can't predict, and maybe that is the bit that around faith and sort of trusting in the
Well, that's
universe,
where the faith
or,
comes in,
or whatever you believe in, that
doesn't
it
it?
it will find its place, that
Yes.
it needs to find. And then the other thing I don't know if I've mentioned before, but I feel really, I'd really, really love to see Broken Madonna as a film. That is my ultimate goal. In a way, it's even goes beyond, of course I'd like to sell quite a few books, but actually what I'd really like to do is see it as a film, because I've always been interested in cinema. I'm a big cinema fan, and here in Brighton, I launched the book with a screening of Cinema Paradiso, which is my
Yeah, I
all-time
saw
favourite
that. Yeah,
film.
yeah.
And I've always loved, that sort of those neo-realism sort of films post Second World War in Italy. So like Vittorio De Sica, he comes from Sora, which is very close to Atina. So that kind of very much that sort of poverty and people's hard lives. I'd like to see a kind of modern retelling of something like, sort of like I'd love to see my film, my book as a film on screen. So I'm
That
hoping.
would be the ultimate. But that leads me to a very important question about, really, before we go back to the beginning. What does literary success look like for you? Is it the fame? Is it the money, or both?
For me, it's about how the book's received.
Right.
To me, actually, it doesn't matter. Of course, it would be lovely if loads and loads of people read it and it's a huge, a runaway bestseller. but more important to me is that people who read it enjoy it.
Yeah.
And it stops to make them, make them think. That's what is important to me
Right.
as a writer, because that's actually when you're writing, you want other people to get what
Oh,
you've
absolutely.
written. And I think that's why I'm
Absolutely.
so delighted with your review, because it was so clear that you completely got what I was trying to get across. And you never know when you're writing whether you've hit the
No,
spot
I say
or some.
I've never written a book, so I have absolutely no idea. I just listen to everyone else and I think, God, that sounds tough. That sounds difficult. With a review, by the end of the week, it's all done and dusted, and
Yeah,
I'm on to the
the
another
next
book.
thing.
But
Yeah.
the thought that you'd spend the best part of your life or whatever writing this, I don't know if I've got the patience. But I just yeah, I just really wanted to give this some time to just try and pull things out of this book. And I think you aren't you? You're pulling such a lot of it. I mean, for me personally, when you mentioned the Battle of Monte Cassino, I mean, I know it. I've passed it. I know the area. I know. And it's for anyone that hasn't seen it, it is the most imposing monastery that's been rebuilt now on top of the hill, isn't it? Really,
Yeah.
and the atrocities that went on. Okay, so we'll put those aside.
So maybe one thing just to mention there, because again, it comes back to the theme of feminism and the female role in the Catholic Church. So one thing that not many people will know is that Monte Cassino, the abbey, the abbazia, was founded by Saint Benedict, and he had a sister called Scholastica, and Scholastica was equally devout as Benedict, but she wasn't allowed to join the monastery, obviously, because she was a woman. So I allowed myself to think about what would Scholastica do if she was such a devout woman and she was nearby? And so that was the kind of, the beginning of, okay, so there might have been a community of women who worshipped nearby. And
Yeah,
who would
yeah,
they
I like
worship?
that. I like
They
that.
worship the Madonna,
Yeah,
because actually she was the strong female figure. And I like the idea that women through the ages would share a story and that would keep the whole thing
yeah,
going.
absolutely.
So that was, that sort of, as I say, people know about Monte Cassino, they know about the battles, but they don't know about
That's
Scholastica.
right.
But the funny thing is, there is it was one of those after I'd written the book and I was doing some, I don't know what I was looking up something locally to the area where it's set in Atina, and there is a church. A Santa Scholastica church very nearby. And I just thought to myself, well, I made all of that up. That's completely a figment of my imagination. But she's the patron saint of children. In
Oh,
fact, and her
right.
feast day is in the middle of February. So again, she has
Yeah,
been recognised,
right.
but
It's
in no way,
relevant. Yeah,
like Benedict. That's my
yeah,
point. Is that
yeah.
that women sort of have been a little somewhat sidelined, shall we say, in the church, and that was something I wanted to kind of use a story to kind of just redress the balance.
Oh, it was lovely. It was brilliant. So let me take you back now. Let's rewind to before fame, when you're sitting in your office doing your marketing and communication, and
Yes.
talk me through or talk us through how we got to this point now.
I think I was always an avid reader and writer, even as a child. So, I was, it used to be my idea of fun was to go down to the library and get a big stack of books out of the library. I always kept a diary. I studied languages at university. So I was the first in my family to go to university. So as I sort of as you briefly touched on in my sort of bio, my parents came to England from Italy in the 50s, from that very poor area, and they came to seek a better life. So they weren't educated, pretty much illiterate, but very good, hardworking people.
Mhm.
And they built their lives in England. So I didn't have a kind of cultural backdrop at all, if you know what I mean, in terms of reading or the arts or anything like that. I think it was just, things that I was interested in. I studied languages, as I say, the first in my family to go to university, but I didn't study Italian. I studied French and German because, like many people who've been brought up with a mother tongue, obviously mine was Italian dialect,
Mhm.
and I found it really hard when we were kids, because there was quite a strong Italian community in St Albans where I grew up. We used to get sent to proper Italian lessons, which I absolutely hated.
Hated.
I hated so much. So that was part
Because
of
you
me
felt you
turning.
did speak Italian, just dialect.
Yeah, and I couldn't reconcile the two very
No,
easily because they were
no.
quite different. And my little, and then I was going, obviously through my teenage years, and the one thing you want, or I wanted at that time, was to be like everyone else. But I realised I wasn't like everyone else, and you realise that later. But so I kind of turned my back a little bit on my Italian heritage. I still got, good relationships with my family, but I'd kind of put my Italian behind me, if you know what I mean. And yeah, 100% of me is Italian blood. There's no, so I think coming back to sort of why did I start writing this book? I think it was partly to come to explore my own Italian heritage in a way that made sense to me.
Right. So,
So
at what age were you? Presumably, you were going back or going to Italy with your parents to
yes,
see their family.
yes, yeah,
So, you always had that dual
yeah.
nationality thing going on.
Yeah, so we used to come back to Italy and
Right.
to that same area in the summer. Not every summer, but enough
Yeah,
summers
sure.
through my childhood. And so it was always, I always felt a little bit like the outsider though, because you can
Yeah.
imagine I used to speak a strange sort of garbled Italian that was partly what I learned in the classes, partly what my heard through my parents, with a wonderful English accent. So everyone thought was a little bit intrigued by me.
What
So
did you feel? Did you feel more Italian or more English, or did it just depend which country you were in? What?
yeah, I mean, I think again that's sort of part of why I wrote this book, because I wanted to find the Italian in me that was the Italian that I could really relate to.
Right.
Because I felt growing up, I felt English, but I had
Yeah.
my education and everything took me
Yeah.
in very much that route, but my values were very Italian, and all that family upbringing, all that how you see life was very Italian. So,
Italian.
and I think because, as I say, culturally, my parents didn't have that background. I was interested in that area. I'd started to look at Italy in a different sort of way as I got older. And I wanted, I've always been interested in history. So I studied French and German history, and I started to get into, I'm really interested in that kind of interwar period in Italy in particular, which is where I set my other novel that I've written. Yeah, so I think hopefully that's answered some of the question about
Yeah,
Italy.
I mean, I'm just British. I just happen to marry an Italian, but I mean, I'm just British. I don't, yeah, goodness knows why I'm living in Italy now. I mean, I'm just British through and through, and it always fascinates me when, here's me really feeling jealous and envious of anybody that's bilingual with different sets of parents. And one of my teacher friends said, but you, Wendy, you're the real thing because you're British. You know, you're the one that's lucky. And I thought, well, I never really saw it like that. I thought she was lucky because she was, spoke Italian and spoke English all the time. But it's just different how you see it, isn't it, really? Absolutely
Yeah, I
different.
mean, I think as well when I was growing up, because bear in mind, so I used to go to Italy mainly, those
Yeah,
trips were in the 70s.
yeah.
So the older women that I referred to in my bio, they were sort of like aunts of my
Mm,
mother. So they were kind of, these were people that were born in the 1880s. So they
mm.
had, there was women who had led some very, very tough lives, the contadini and the real
Yeah,
peasants
absolutely.
farming,
Absolutely.
working for landowners and, having to live hand to mouth. And I realized that although I felt when I was growing up, I had nothing in common with them because my life was so different. I was into, as I got into the 80s, I was into alternative music, all of that kind of thing. And then, you'd have this very traditional Italian upbringing where things were kind of really, my parents were born in the 20s. I was an
Yeah,
accident
yeah,
child
yeah,
much later
yeah,
to
yeah,
them.
yeah. You said that, yeah.
So therefore they brought with them to England those values of when they were growing up. So there was not only was there a
Mm,
cultural difference, there was a
yeah,
generational difference. And I
right.
think that kind of lends, going back in time and looking, and that's probably, it's not probably, it's definitely why I wrote the book. I think it was very much around a kind of wanting to explore my background, but not doing it in a sort of way about me personally, but just to explore lives at that particular moment in time in that place, because it doesn't get it written about in the English language. It's different in Italy, obviously, but in England, people don't know about that part of Italy.
No,
It's
no,
it's a corner that's off the tourist track,
sure.
yet it is still very beautiful. So
Is there a chance that we will see Broken Madonna translated and offered in Italy? Will we see that happen, do you think?
I very much hope so. I don't quite know at this stage how that's going to happen. I have a very lovely friend here in locally who's Italian, living here and has been here for a very long time, who also has a publishing background. And if anyone could translate it for me, it
She
would be
could.
her. But it's just a kind of trying to get the kind of priorities of what do first with the book. And obviously this the first bit is about getting it out there in English, and I think hopefully the Italian translation can
And
follow.
tell me how we got, you were writing the book, you've got drafts. I know you got this grant from to help you with your writing. Was that how did that happen? You applied for a grant, you just thought I mean, because so many writers, they have day jobs, of course they do, and until they get success. So if there's anything to help them
Yeah,
financially, otherwise, how can anybody do it? Talk us through how
how I
that
got to there.
happened.
So back in 2014, that was when I really seriously started writing my not Broken Madonna, the novel that I wrote before that. And I was very lucky that I won a place in a competition run by New Writing South, who I'm now chair of trustees of, because I'm paying back. I feel now
Yeah,
I
cool.
wanted to give back for what I received. So as a result of that, I was able to apply for an Arts Council grant, and I got some money to help me do some research in Italy and for some mentoring, and a little bit of time to write. And it made a huge
I
difference,
can imagine.
you know,
Because
because
otherwise, you're just on your own, aren't you?
exactly, and it gives you a kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of somebody thinks you're worth investing in, essentially, as a
Well,
writer.
I suppose it's a sense of validation in a way. I mean, this is, I suppose, what we say to our new writers on the writing retreat. Just for somebody, when they all start reading each other's work, and for somebody to say, "This is really good." Don't we all need that sense of validation that, oh, okay, four people here think this is really good. It's worth pursuing. How can we ever get that? And it's so difficult.
But I think, to be quite honest, so I wrote my first novel, which is called The Lives We Leave
Leave
Behind,
behind, yeah.
and I submitted that and got close, and was going to go ahead with a small publisher. That didn't come to pass, and I just, if I'm completely honest, I got kind of a bit jaded about the whole submission process. I thought I'll just put that book away, and then I started to write Broken Madonna. But what I was going to say is, I think the sort of backdrop for the arts and for writing, I think, has got a lot tougher
Right.
in that 10 years. So I
Mhm.
got that grant in 2014. We're 10
Yeah.
years on now. I think I'd be hard pressed to get that again now. Oh, I
Did
wouldn't get it
you?
again 'cause I've had it well, anyway. But I just think there's less money to go around,
I'm sure.
you
Yeah.
know, and I just think the landscape of publishing has got a lot tougher. When I submitted my first novel, you'd at least get people say thanks, but no thanks, sort of thing. Whereas now the standard is, it's just like, tumbleweed, you get nothing at all, sort of thing, if people aren't interested. So I think my take, and because I sort of, because of my role as chair of trustees with New Writing South, and just the fact that I know quite a lot of writers and I'm quite well networked, you know, it's not just my personal observation, it's what's happened in the industry. So it's changed. I think it's harder than ever for a debut novelist to make it through, to be quite
So
honest.
how did you get the book published then? What was your, I mean, like most people, they
Yeah,
have no idea even what's out there, and
yeah.
it's a changing landscape as you're saying. What it was like 5 years ago, it's quite different now. So how did you know this? I want to get a publisher. I don't want to self-publish. What were the choices open to you that
Okay.
you
So I
wanted to
think
do?
so I did the thing of going round and, submitting to agents,
Yeah.
which is obviously what most people do to start off with. And I got quite a lot of, bites in terms of
Yeah.
people asking for full manuscript, both on my first book and on Broken Madonna. But I think where Broken Madonna sort of, it's both its strength, but probably a weakness for a traditional publisher, is it's quite literary in terms of its sort of, descriptions and language and all of that sort of thing. But actually, it's got quite a kind of, it's quite character driven and plot driven story. So it kind of falls into that spot between literary work and
Right.
commercial genre fiction.
Right. Right.
And for a traditional publisher, that is the hardest type of
Yes.
book to
The
place.
place.
Um, but they can also be the big standout, big sellers because actually they appeal to quite a
Mm,
wide audience.
mm.
So I kind of knew when I was, and I get this sort of feedback that was about, we don't know where we'd place it, sort of thing. And I thought to myself, well, I can keep sort of knocking on these doors, or I can do something different. And so I decided, because I've worked for myself for quite a few years as well, so I'm quite good at sort of just, thinking, right, who could help me with this? How do I connect with so and so, so and so? And I started to look at the world of self-publishing, and I just thought to myself, yeah, I think I can do this and do it well. So my thinking was very much I'm going to publish to a standard that is completely, you wouldn't see the difference from
Mm,
traditional publishing.
mm,
And that's what I've been
mm,
able to
mm.
do. So I feel, I feel vindicated in the decision because I feel that now at least people can read my book rather than it sitting on my laptop and people saying to me, "Oh, it's a lovely book, but it's not for us," sort of thing. So and that leaves you as
I
a
think
writer
it's, I just think it's
feeling,
so hard for anybody that's writing to consider, I mean, as we say at the Writing Institute, there is no one size that fits
yeah.
all here. There just isn't. I mean, we just say what these different routes are, and then it's really up to you. It's up to you. Every contract, even if you have a contract with a publisher, they're not even all the same, but they're all so different in terms of what control you have over the cover, the editing, the storyline. There's no advice, I think, really.
And I think that's
It's like in a very Italian way, it's well, it depends, doesn't it really? And every
I
Italian
think
says that.
you learn
So,
as you go along. So just thinking that the traditional publishing model for an author,
yeah.
there are of course there are people who make a big success of it, but there's a lot of people that will their book might get published, but they might not feel that they particularly have much of a say about their cover,
They
how it gets
don't. They really
publicized,
don't.
and then they've got to sort of do much of the publicity work for
Yeah.
themselves. And I kind of looked at that and looked at the financials and thought, actually, the more it went on, I just thought, I don't know why I'm even trying to do this the traditional
I
way. I don't think it suits me.
it seems to me from published what they say, it's not the holy grail that people think
Yeah,
it is. I know one author friend, she's got a publisher, but the publisher said, right, yeah, we'll have another book, but we want it set in Switzerland, please.
yeah.
Okay. That was not her choice to set that book in Switzerland or wherever it was. But she has to because that's what the contract says. That,
But that's kind of
how
what you
hard, that's
sign
so
up for. And I
hard.
think if you go into it with your eyes open,
Yeah,
that's fair enough. I think
yeah,
when I think about my own sort of writing journey and what I wanted to achieve, I want to write stories that I feel touch people
yeah,
and to
sure.
get, the thing about how you get them out there. So it becomes, all right, well, could you do traditional publishing? Do you, maybe go do some crowdsourcing to raise some funds to do it? Do you go down a hybrid route, and, essentially buy and self-publishing services? I just thought to myself, actually, when I look at it all, I really liked the idea of being able to, say, right, that's the bit I'm lacking knowledge of. But as I say, it takes a certain amount of time and confidence to be
I'm
able to
sure.
do
I
that.
When I saw it, I wasn't sure because you have an imprint. I can't remember what your imprint is now.
Fluency publishing.
That's right. And I thought, oh, I mean, usually I look it up and, and you try and find a website. And I wasn't really sure that you cannot tell. This is the
Yeah,
thing, as you're saying, if this is done well and your cover is amazing, and you've obviously had a good editor along the way as well, I guess, through
yes,
through
yeah.
process.
I've had editorial support
You've had
throughout.
all of
So
that. You cannot tell. You cannot say, well, she's self-published or he's this is you really can't tell. Not if it's done to such a high standard. And it would be nice if Amazon had some kind of quality control, wouldn't it? Really, so that we do see books of a high standard. Because even now, oh, if it's published on Amazon, it's going to be rubbish, or and it's not going to be very well edited. It doesn't have to be like that. It really doesn't. It's up to you.
And I think the thing is, things are changing. So
Yeah, they are.
for my
Yeah.
book, I had a print run done, so
Yeah.
I could guarantee the
Yeah.
quality of it.
Right. Right.
And then I'm also on Amazon, and I'm also distributing via Ingram Spark. So I kind of see my route as mainly through direct sales and through
Yeah.
Amazon. It's not really going to be through bookshops because, quite
Yeah.
frankly, that's not going to happen for me as and other, in a long list of authors. But that doesn't mean to say that the book isn't quality, and that doesn't mean to say it hasn't got a place in terms of a
But
readership, because
please come to Italy
I
and
will.
we'll do a book signing or something like that. That would be amazing, wouldn't it?
I'd love to.
But you're
I'd
not
love to,
that far away. You're not that too far away from me, are you?
because I
Over.
just think to myself that I know so many writers who've become disillusioned through the submission process.
Yeah.
And I'm not having it pop at the industry, because that's not, it's not where I'm coming from. I'm just talking about it from an individual writer perspective, which is, all you want, whenever you talk to any writer, all they ever want is to see their book, their words published. They just want to be able to hold their book and say, this is my work, and be proud of it. And I think the route of how you get there can be very varied, and I think it's about being clear about what your goals are for
Yeah.
it as well.
Yeah.
I'm fairly realistic about what my goals are for it. But as I say, I have got a very big dream about the film, So why not dream big?
Because whether it's because you've been in marketing and communication, you're obviously of the mindset, well, it's a business, which is something that I really, really feel strongly for. It's a business. You're not writing this, for nothing. You're not devoting all these years of your life to do nothing with. It's a business. See it as a business. Promote it, market it as if you've got a product, which it is. It's your product. And your website is lovely. And I
Yeah.
think the way that you've got your author platform out there, which is something else I bang on about at the writing retreat, get that ready and show people where this has come from. This was my baby. These were the photographs of the orphanage. This is where I got the inspiration from. It gives you that sense of connection with your readers. I thought that was lovely. I think that is such a lovely touch. And this is Sophia Loren, which obviously we know anyway, but this is Sophia, and one of the characters looks a little bit like her as well. I think you've done an amazing job with
Thank
this.
you. Thank you.
You really have.
I think the sort of the business side of things, it comes hard to writers because, essentially, if you're writing, it's because you've got a creative urge and you want to
Yeah.
sort of,
Yeah.
produce something, and that, that doesn't necessarily go with it, thinking of it as a business.
But there's so many writers that you come across so many that, well, I don't know anything about marketing. I haven't got time to market my book. Well, I'm sorry, make time. Really, really make time.
Yeah, I mean,
You have to. It's
and
your
I,
product. It's your baby, isn't
I've got to
it?
be honest that social media doesn't come naturally to me either. That kind of thing of sharing and all the rest of it. But I do feel proud of what I've done, so I try and see it through that lens.
You
That thinking,
should
well,
be.
the only way people will know about it is if if I start the ball rolling as to people hearing about it, and then hopefully other people will hear about it, and then it starts to
Absolutely.
gather a
You
momentum.
are a really good role model and absolutely fabulous for this is how, this is the book. This is where I've got to with this, really. I think that's fantastic. Really, I do. Right. Another question for you
Yes.
then. One piece of advice that you would give to aspiring writers, please.
Well, that's an interesting question. It's a good one, Wendy. What advice would I think if I look back on my 10 years of getting to this point, I wouldn't have left it so long to kind of get to this
Wow.
stage. I think I spent too long waiting for the validation of an agent, thinking that was what I needed to prove that I was a decent writer. Whereas I knew because I'm part of a writing group. So again, maybe a piece of advice would be get yourself your writing tribe, your writing allies. So
Yeah.
I've been part of a writing group since 2017. I put it out there that I was looking for people who were at a similar stage to me. I had written quite a lot already, but weren't published. So that we knew that we were at a certain standard, but that we had each other to kind of push each other forward. And that group is still going to this day. We're having our Christmas lunch this
Oh,
week. So that's one piece of advice. Get yourself your writing tribe with
I
whatever
think
way
that's
you find it.
really nice. A nice word to one thing that I get all the time, really, I keep my ear to the ground, obviously. What a lonely, solitary world this can be when you're
Yeah.
just writing day after day or in the evening weekends. So what you're saying, the advice is you've got to get yourself out there and meet people who are doing the same. Then you won't feel so
So
solitary,
low. Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
alone. So that's a great piece of advice.
Yeah. No, I definitely would do that because it's made a huge difference to
Different,
me.
yeah,
And I think,
sure.
well, especially in a sort of social media era, if all you ever see are people saying, oh, look at me and look at my book, and you're still sort of, plugging away trying to, get the characters right, or my plot sticks here, or it sags there, or whatever. If you've got other people to talk to about that, it just validates that this is something
Yeah.
that is worth spending my time on because, you know, for most writers, they'll be, working for a considerable amount of time to get their first book out. It may be different once your first one's out there, but to get to that first one, it's the very lucky or with the, excuse me, who gets there quickly. So,
I remember going to hear a talk many years ago by, well, she was unknown then, an author called Tracy Chevalier.
oh yes, I know her. I love her
Yeah,
writing.
I know. And that was, she had a day job. She had two kids, husband, and she said that she just wrote in the evenings. And she followed that through with, she just had her first book published, Girl with the Pearl Earring, and it had been chosen for film rights. But what people who are writing, I think, don't realize is that behind every successful author, there is this journey. There is this, years of darkness almost, where you're fumbling about. And she was an absolute example of just with a good wind behind you and a good product and maybe a good editor and a lot of perseverance, you can get there. You
Mm.
can get there. And she said, look at me. They've asked me on set to, comment on the film being made. And you just think it's possible. And you have to have that dream, don't you, really, I would say.
I think you do. And it's funny you should mention Tracy Chevalier because going back to the very first question you asked me about the cover, when I first saw it, I thought to myself, it reminds me of the cover of The Girl with the
Mm,
Pearl Earring. It's got that
yeah,
same sort of feel.
yeah, yeah,
And I love her
absolutely.
writing.
Yes.
But going back to the years of darkness, I think they don't need to be years of darkness. In fact, I've had some
No.
of the best things, but some of the best experiences I've met is meeting other writers,
Yeah,
my
that's
writing
really good
group.
advice. Really.
Make it fun, because if the
Yeah,
process is fun, you're going to be potentially quite disappointed by what the outcome might be,
yeah.
even if you supposedly reach the heights of what everyone else dreams of. It may not be. You've got to enjoy the process of writing, and going through and editing and
Mm.
going over it again and again, and surrounding yourself with people who understand that, rather than people that say to you, what, you're still working on your book? You've been at
Yeah,
it
yeah.
for years.
Haven't you finished that? Yeah. It's not a piece of homework. Right. My final question is your favorite childhood book.
Okay, that's quite easy for me actually, because it's not only child. You probably realise I like words and visuals as well. So for me, it is definitely Little House on the Prairie. It's Laura
Wow.
Ingalls
Oh,
Wilder. The whole series. I used to go backward and forwards to the library to get one after the other, and I loved, the
mm,
the TV program that went with it as well. So my two daughters, when they were little, I got them through this. They both read the books. They've got all the films on DVD. So it's not only my special childhood memory, it's now also theirs. Because I
yeah.
think there is something, again, it's about families through
Mm,
time, which again is
mm.
a theme going back to
It's nice.
Broken Madonna. It's
Lovely
that thing
too.
of how do people, and those are also quite hard, ordinary lives as well. And I think, again, that's probably why I was drawn to those books. But I used to love Enid Blyton as well, even though perhaps
I think we all did.
Enid Blyton isn't quite seen in
It's
the
just
same
finding
way
people who
today.
admit to it these.
I love The Secret Seven.
Um, so the next, let's just talk about where people can find the books because that's really important. Your social media is your website is Anna Lucia, isn't it? So Anna
Lucia.co.uk.
Lucia. You're on Facebook, you're on Instagram. Where else are you?
I'm on Instagram, I'm on Blue Sky, I'm
Yeah,
on
good.
Twitter.
Right.
I'm not on Facebook actually. It's something I've never done. So I thought, I know that most people are, but I thought I'm not going to start there now. In terms of buying my books, if you just go onto Amazon, you can see them there very easily. They're starting to get some really nice reviews on there as well now, by direct from my website as well, and then through bookshops as well. It can be ordered.
And the next one in the
So
pipeline we have.
I've got two options kind of, and I'm sort of weighing them up at the moment. One is to go back to the lives we leave behind. And because essentially one of the characters, Padre Bosco, that's in Broken Madonna, I've got his backstory in the first book.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's kind of, and I won't mention who else is, because again, that gives us something away of this book. But so I've got that book that's all is fully written, and was very nearly published. So I think to myself, do I go back to that, or do I go forward? And there's one character that comes up fairly late in Broken Madonna, who's called Dorothy, and she's a religious TV presenter in the late '90s, religious stroke history TV presenter, and I felt her as a character quite. I really liked her, and
Mm.
she's quite feisty and sort of bit sort of she's a woman with her own mind. She starts to, again, without sort of giving away too much of the plot. There's a thing of that she may be about to embark on a relationship. Um, yeah, I mustn't say too much
Yeah,
about
no, don't no, no spoilers.
that.
No
So
spoilers.
basically, she is a character that I thought actually could lead me to a more
Yeah, it could
contemporary
develop
novel.
more. Oh
Yeah,
wow.
and I thought to
So
myself, and that would
watch
be
this
in this.
space then.
So I've got two options, and I'm not too sure which way to go at the moment.
Wow, that sounds really exciting. You certainly deserve success. Fabulous book, fabulous story, beautiful cover. Amazing. And thank you for your time today. It's
Oh,
been a it really has. It's so nice to finally meet you.
I've really enjoyed talking about all things writing with you, Wendy, and it's
Yeah,
lovely
and
to have that
Italy,
somebody, somebody who
sometimes
really
when I
understands.
play these videos back and I think, God, we don't have to go on about Italy sometimes. But,
But that's the point.
it was just, I mean, for me, just, okay, what can I do? I like books and I like Italy, yes, but what can I do? It just, so,
And it's happened.
it just happened.
Yeah.
So I'll be there for the next one.
Lovely. Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you again for your time and well done.
Arrivederci.
Ci vediamo.
See, ciao.